When I pick up a book, I know there is a lot of information to take in. There are potential hours and hours of my eyes going back and forth across the pages, but the cover of all this knowledge dictates if I will read it or not. It's kind of sad, really, that I may pass up on something just because of one glance. We've all heard it, don't judge a book by its cover. But when it comes to people, we often forget that there's more than just what's on the surface, that a person's life is complex. My name is Andrew Albritton, and I have a double BFA from Louisiana Tech University in graphic design and studio art. When I started taking classes at Tech School of Design, I chose to focus my work around detail and storytelling. Growing up, I immersed myself in other worlds through books, movies, television, and music, and these outlets provided me stories and characters that reflected real life. They helped me at a young age understand, at least in an elementary way, what identity was and how complex it could be. Through this inspiration, I attempted to create that same depth within my work. Back then, I didn't really know what I was looking for, but now I understand that each of my pieces was an effort to mimic that feeling of when I experienced an amazing story. Because I'm a graphic designer, in addition to a studio artist, design has been a large influence in my work. And because of my love of stories, typography started to appear in many of my pieces. Echo Chamber was the first ever collage. I didn't know it at the time, but this project was the first piece in an ongoing body of work. I knew that typography was important. I also knew that using paper to create my work was important. However, I did not know why. But I did understand that my work was beginning to be about identity. I attempted to throw all my ideas into a large, life-size sculpture now titled By My Cover. I described this piece as a three-dimensional gesture drawing. I used torn book pages to fill in patches of the skin because I wanted the viewer to see that this person was complex and that in one glance you cannot possibly make out who this person really was or what their identity contained. That is how I wrapped up 2018. I was beginning to understand where my work would take me and what I could say with it. My first piece of 2019, Flayed Reflection, was my attempt at dissecting complex identity into one segment. By researching other artists such as Amalia Ullman, I understood that people wear different faces in different parts of their life. By looking into this idea further, I wanted to be more specific to an individual, for I realized that I was attempting to make something relatable by making it generic, which doesn't work. Royalty is a three-part miniseries I created by interviewing a model about two dominant sides of themselves. Each panel holds two sides of their identity that I discovered in their interview. They are not flat, they are not one-sided. Every person has depth and texture to their life. This is why I use collage, because it visually creates layers and texture. It creates a portrait out of many small parts, and I can use material that directly comes from my real-life inspiration for my piece. This real-life inspiration comes from the interview that I conduct with my model. In this interview, I asked questions about who they are, where they come from, and how they see themselves in different situations, and many other questions that became original to the interview. I began experimenting with creating even more visual layers outside of just a paper collage. In my piece titled Barnell, I veered away from a traditional portrait and used direct quotes from the interview laser cut into two plywood panels. These layers represent how my model viewed himself in the past versus how he views himself now. Another aspect of my work is photography. It is an amazing resource to capture someone's images as close to reality as possible. In my 5-part miniseries Masquerade, I used long exposure photography to capture multiple sides of my models. By making pieces about others' identities, I ran into a problem. By me interviewing them, choosing what to use from their identities, and just me making their portrait in general, I lose who they are. Lisa Coquin, an artist who uses found photography, stated about her work that, quote, "Of course, in the final analysis, these works are more about me than any of the other individuals who appear in my work," end quote. I've learned to acknowledge this problem, and like an author writing a book, I view my pieces as characters inspired from real life and my own interpretation. With COVID-19, my work has changed. I no longer have access to wood shops or people to interview, so I've been using my time to take another look at identity and how people treat one another. Instead of using my work to explore someone's identity, I started using it to represent the loss of identity. When someone is placed in a group, there is a loss of oneself. This can be seen in mob mentality, social justice, hive minds, or even just hanging out with a group of friends. When you are with others, you will do things you would never do on your own. You lose a sense of yourself. There's an irony to it, for when I look at my past work as a whole, I lose a sense of individualism, which is exactly the opposite of what I was trying to do. All my work become just individual numbers, just like people do in the real world. In this work, in this new work, I have been making photographs that I digitally composite into one image that represents this idea. I use hands that are not the individuals to show the invisible control that others have on our lives. These images are not supposed to be comforting, for there is something inherently disturbing about this loss of identity. My goal is to combine this with my past collage technique, and I have been playing around with cyanotypes to achieve this. I am still early on in this method of photography, but my eventual goal is to expose these photographs onto cyanotype-coded collages that help express the meaning behind each piece. I am excited to see where this work will lead me in the future. Thank you.